Most people get Merry Christmas texts from their mom. I got you're homeless now, but when I showed up anyway, what I found behind that door wasn't anger. It was something that made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. Christmas morning hit different that year. While most families were unwrapping presents and arguing over who ate the last piece of ham, I got a text that made my stomach drop faster than my cousin's New Year's resolutions. Locks have changed. You've got no home. Thanks, Mom. Merry Christmas to you too. The caps lock really drove the point home, didn't it? Nothing says holiday cheer like digital eviction notices served with your morning coffee, but here's what shocked me more than the message itself, finding out later that I wasn't some rare case of family dysfunction. Turns out, parental estrangement is way more common than people talk about. About 6% of adults report going through periods where their mothers completely cut them off. That's roughly 1 in every 17 people walking around with similar stories. Your friendly barista? Maybe? That guy who always takes forever at the grocery store self-checkout, possibly dealing with the same mess. Then there's the father situation, which gets even weirder. Over 25% of adults experience father-child estrangement at least once in their lives. 1 in 4. Sometimes it builds up slowly, like watching paint peel. Other times it hits like a freight train on Christmas morning, just like my situation. Makes you wonder what's really happening behind all those happy family photos on social media, right? Well, here's the thing about timing. Family conflicts don't just randomly explode during the holidays. There's actually science behind it. Holiday gatherings are like emotional pressure cookers. Everyone's stressed about money they spent on gifts they couldn't afford. Old resentments bubble up faster than champagne at midnight. Expectations run high while patience runs low. It's basically the perfect storm for family drama. The stats back this up too. Family therapists see their busiest seasons right after major holidays. Emergency family mediation services get flooded with calls between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Something about forced togetherness and financial stress brings out the worst in people. But let's not forget the bigger picture here. About 40% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. That's nearly half of all couples who start with "till death do us part" and end with "till lawyers do us part." These broken marriages create unstable homes for kids, and unstable homes create adults who sometimes send eviction texts on Christmas morning. The weird part is how normalized we've made family dysfunction. We joke about avoiding relatives at reunions or dreading holiday dinners, but when it escalates to complete cutoffs and changed locks, suddenly everyone acts surprised, like we didn't see this coming from miles away. Standing there staring at that text message, I realized my perfectly imperfect family had just become a statistic. Another casualty in America's ongoing experiment with modern family structures. The question wasn't why this happened, the question was what came next. Because getting locked out was just the beginning of discovering how deep this rabbit hole actually goes. Racing home felt like the longest drive of my life. Every red light seemed personal. My hands gripped the steering wheel while my mind raced through possibilities. Maybe she was bluffing? Maybe this was some twisted Christmas joke? But deep down I knew Mom didn't joke about stuff like this. When I pulled into the driveway, reality hit harder than a sledgehammer. Those weren't our old familiar locks anymore. Shiny new deadbolts gleamed in the winter sun like they were mocking me. The brass was so fresh it still had that store-bought shine. I tried my key anyway. Obviously it didn't work. The weird part is how normal everything else looked. Same welcome mat. Same crooked mailbox Dad never fixed. Same garden gnome Mom bought at a garage sale 3 summers ago. But those locks, they screamed one message loud and clear. You don't belong here anymore. Standing there on what used to be my front porch, I remembered something my sociology professor mentioned. Around 90% of divorced mothers end up with legal custody of their kids. Makes sense, right? Courts traditionally favor moms. But what nobody talks about is how quickly things can flip when you're legally an adult. Suddenly that protection vanishes. Then there's the legal mess most people don't understand. Sure, landlords need to give tenants proper eviction notices in most states, but family situations? Well, that's a whole different ballgame. When it's your parents' house and you're over 18, the rules get murky fast. No 30-day notice required when blood is involved. I walked around the house checking windows like some kind of desperate burglar. The back door? New lock. Side entrance? Yep, changed too. Mom had been thorough. Almost impressively thorough if it wasn't happening to me. What really gets me is how common this stuff actually is. Kids from divorced or blended families are 3 times more likely to need therapy compared to kids from intact homes. 3 times. And here I was, living proof that statistics aren't just numbers on a page. Let's not forget the bigger picture here. 1 in 2 American kids will watch their parents split up at least once during childhood. Half of all kids, that means in any classroom, half those students are dealing with some version of family chaos. Makes you wonder why we still act like divorce is unusual. The house felt like it was staring at me through those windows, judging me, wondering why I couldn't see this coming. But honestly, how do you prepare for getting locked out of your own childhood? They don't exactly teach sudden family abandonment 101 inches in high school. Eventually, I stopped trying different windows and just stood there in the cold. The neighbors probably thought I'd lost my mind, a grown person circling a house like a confused cat. But what else was I supposed to do? That's when I decided to peer through the living room window, hoping to spot Mom inside. What I saw instead would explain everything and nothing, all at once. Walking through those familiar hallways felt like entering a museum of my own life. The house looked exactly the same at first glance. Same furniture, same carpet, even the same smell of vanilla candles Mom always burned. But something was off. The family photos were gone. Every single one. You know those picture frames that sit on mantles and side tables? Empty. The walls where our smiling faces used to hang? Bare spots with slightly different paint colors, like ghost outlines of happier times. It's funny how you never notice how many family pictures you have until they all disappear at once. Changes in family structure mess with kids' heads more than most people realize. When your stable foundation suddenly shifts, your brain doesn't know how to process it. Social development gets thrown off track because you're spending all your energy just trying to figure out what's normal anymore. Makes sense, right? Then there's the trust issue. Boys and girls from broken homes often start dating earlier than their peers. Why? Well, they're searching for the stability they lost at home. But here's the weird part, they also trust less in those relationships. They're simultaneously desperately seeking connection while expecting it to fall apart. Talk about emotional whiplash. The statistics get darker from there. Kids whose parents split are 3 times more likely to move out young or start living with romantic partners sooner. They're basically fast-tracking through life stages, trying to create the family stability they never had. It's like they're racing towards something that might not even exist. Let's not forget the most troubling numbers. Teens from homes with ongoing conflict are nearly twice as likely to attempt suicide compared to kids from stable families. The constant stress and uncertainty literally rewire developing brains. These aren't just temporary growing pains. We're talking about fundamental changes to how someone processes relationships and stress for the rest of their lives. Standing in that photoless living room, I was becoming another statistic. Another kid whose family imploded during what should have been the happiest time of year. The silence was deafening. No Christmas music, no cooking sounds from the kitchen, no familiar voices calling my name. But here's what nobody tells you about these moments. Your mind starts bargaining. Maybe this is temporary. Maybe she just needed space to cool down. Maybe those empty picture frames meant she was redecorating, not erasing me from existence. Your brain creates elaborate explanations because the simple truth is too painful to accept. The house felt bigger somehow, emptier, like those missing photographs had taken up more space than I ever realized. Each bare wall was a reminder that I was no longer part of this family's story. At least, not the version Mom wanted to tell. Walking from room to room, I kept expecting to find some clue about what happened next. Some hint about where I fit into this new reality. What I found instead would change everything I thought I knew about my situation. After searching through every room twice, I finally found what I was looking for. Well, sort of. A single piece of paper sat on the kitchen counter where we used to eat breakfast together. The handwriting was definitely hers. "You have to find your own way now." That was it. 8 words that basically summed up my entire future. The weird part is how normal everything else looked. The coffee maker still had yesterday's grounds in it. Her reading glasses were folded neatly by the newspaper. But those 8 words changed everything in ways I couldn't even imagine yet. Here's something most people don't realize about family cutoffs like this. About 81% of adults who lose contact with their mothers eventually reconnect down the road. Sounds hopeful, right? But here's the catch. Nobody tells you how long that road actually is. Some people wait months, others wait decades, and some never make it back at all. Let's not forget what happens to kids when this kind of family explosion occurs. Children from broken homes are twice as likely to drop out of high school compared to their classmates. Makes sense when you think about it. Hard to focus on algebra when you're wondering where you're going to sleep tonight. Then there's the really tough statistic that nobody wants to talk about. Girls whose fathers left early in their lives are 8 times more likely to become pregnant as teenagers. 8 times. That's not a small difference. That's a completely different life trajectory. Boys don't escape the impact either. They're more likely to struggle with authority figures and have trouble forming stable relationships later on. But why does this happen so suddenly? Well, family breakdowns rarely occur overnight, even when they seem to. Most of the time, there are months or even years of building tension that nobody wants to address. The explosion feels sudden, but the fuse has been burning for a long time, and the mental health impact, anxiety and depression often get significantly worse after an abrupt family split like this. The human brain isn't designed to handle this kind of rejection from the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally. It's like emotional whiplash. You need real support to recover properly. The letter didn't explain anything about why this was happening or what I supposedly did wrong. Just those 8 words staring back at me from that piece of paper. Classic avoidance behavior, actually. When parents can't handle direct confrontation about family problems, they often resort to these kind of dramatic gestures instead of honest conversations. Standing in that kitchen, holding that note, I realized something important. This wasn't really about me finding my own way. This was about her not knowing how to deal with whatever was going on in her own head. Sometimes parents project their failures onto their kids because it's easier than looking in the mirror. The question wasn't just where I was going to live anymore. The real question was how this was going to shape the rest of my life and whether I'd end up repeating the same patterns. Well, here's where the story gets interesting in a way nobody talks about. Standing in that empty house holding that letter, I had no clue I was about to become part of a massive pattern. Children of divorce don't just heal and move on like some fairy tale ending. We grow up and often marry other children of divorce. Makes sense, right? We understand each other's trust issues and family baggage. But here's the kicker. 35% of children of divorce eventually divorce themselves. We're literally passing down broken family patterns like some twisted inheritance. Your parents split up, you grow up thinking that's normal, and boom, you're signing divorce papers 20 years later. The cycle keeps spinning, and the weird part is, most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We think we're different. We promise ourselves we'll never put our kids through what we went through. Then life happens, stress builds up, and suddenly we're having the same fights our parents had. It's like watching a really depressing rerun. Let's not forget that reconnecting with estranged family members isn't some Hollywood movie moment either. Sure, 81% of adults who lose contact with their mothers eventually reconnect, but eventually can mean years, sometimes decades. I'm talking about awkward phone calls, stilted conversations, and learning to trust someone who locked you out of your childhood home. That healing process, it's messier than cleaning up after a toddler's birthday party. Then there's the reality check about modern American families. Blended and single-parent families now make up almost half of all homes in the U.S. What happened to me isn't some rare tragedy, it's practically a statistical norm. Your friend with divorced parents, your coworker raised by a single mom, your neighbor in a blended family, were everywhere. The traditional nuclear family is becoming the exception, not the rule. But why does this matter for someone standing in an empty house on Christmas morning? Because understanding you're not alone changes everything. When you realize that millions of people have walked through similar locked doors, felt the same shock, and somehow figured out how to build their own lives, it stops feeling like personal failure and starts feeling like just another chapter. Real healing doesn't start with grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It starts with finding one person who gets it. Maybe it's a friend whose dad walked out, maybe it's a counselor who specializes in family trauma, or maybe it's a support group where everyone has their own version of that Christmas morning text message. The path forward isn't about fixing your broken family or getting your old life back, it's about building something new, something stable, something that breaks the cycle instead of continuing it. Most people who go through family estrangement eventually find their footing, but it takes work, patience, and usually some professional help. Standing in that house, I didn't know any of this yet, I just knew everything had changed, and I had to figure out what came next. Sometimes that's exactly where healing begins.